And when I think back on my career, it's not always about winning the championships. And
only losers say that. Only losers say that. Only losers say it's not about winning a championship.
There's a moment in the life cycle of every sports franchise, a single, defining window, where everything either crystallizes into greatness or quietly collapses into irrelevance. The Indiana Fever are standing directly inside that window right now. And the person holding the key to that door is making decisions that should terrify every single person who has ever believed in what Caitlin Clark represents. Let's establish exactly what is at stake here, because this is not a casual sports debate. This is not a hot take manufactured for clicks. This is a forensic examination of a coaching relationship that is actively deteriorating in real time, on camera, in press conferences, on the court, and the evidence is overwhelming. When the Indiana Fever drafted Caitlin Clark, they didn't just add a basketball player to a roster. They ignited a cultural movement. They handed their franchise a generational gift so rare, so historically significant, that comparable moments in professional sports can be counted on one hand. Michael Jordan arriving in Chicago, LeBron James entering the league, Stephen Curry emerging in Golden State. These are the moments where organizations are handed lightning in a bottle. And the only question that matters is whether the people in charge are equipped to hold it. Right now, the answer in Indianapolis is deeply, alarmingly troubling. Because while Caitlin Clark brings to the court a level of competitive ferocity that hasn't been seen in women's basketball, arguably ever, the head coach standing on that sideline is operating with a philosophy so fundamentally misaligned with Clark's DNA that the collision between them isn't just inevitable. It's already happening, quietly, painfully, and with potentially irreversible consequences. Coaching the way you would have wanted to be coached. That sounds admirable on the surface. Humble, even. But dig one layer deeper, and a deeply uncomfortable truth emerges. Stephanie White is not coaching Caitlin Clark. She is coaching a version of herself, a player from a different era, with a different skill set, operating within the constraints of a basketball world that no longer exists. And that disconnect is costing the Indiana Fever in ways that the box score cannot fully capture. Before we get into the tactical devastation, we need to address the thing that is making Fever fans genuinely furious. Not just frustrated, not just concerned, furious. Because losing basketball games is one thing, but being actively misled about those losses, that is a completely different category of organizational failure. In professional sports, the post-game press conference serves one essential function: accountability. It is the moment where the head coach stands before the public, accepts the weight of what just happened on the floor, and communicates a credible, honest plan to fix it. It is the covenant between a coaching staff and its fan base. And right now, that covenant is being shattered on a near-weekly basis in Indianapolis, when the Indiana Fever were dismantled on their home floor, outscored in a single quarter by a margin that bordered on embarrassing. The response from the head coach was not honest self-reflection. It was not the kind of raw, accountable language that championship-caliber coaches use when their system breaks down. What the fan base received instead was the organizational equivalent of a participation trophy. Out of our control. 3 words that tell you everything you need to know about the philosophical foundation of this coaching staff. Because here is the brutal reality. Elite coaches do not operate in the language of things being out of their control. Elite coaches exist in a state of perpetual obsessive ownership. They own the preparation. They own the rotations. They own the culture. They own the outcome. The moment a head coach publicly retreats into the vocabulary of helplessness, they have already begun the process of surrendering the locker room. And this is not a minor stylistic preference. This is not splitting hairs over tone. The psychological impact of this specific type of language on a roster, particularly on a roster anchored by an athlete of Caitlin Clark's competitive constitution, cannot be overstated. Clark did not break every major scoring record in the history of collegiate basketball by accepting the idea that things were out of her control. She attacked every obstacle as a problem with a solution. She manufactured advantages through sheer, relentless willpower. The question that every serious Fever fan needs to sit with is this: what happens to a player of that psychological makeup when the message from the top of the organization is consistently, reliably one of managed expectations and shared excuses? That's the word that cuts through all the press conference polish and all the organizational spin. Exploitation. Not intentional exploitation, but structural exploitation. A situation where the superstar's gravitational pull is being used to mask the inadequacies of the system surrounding her, rather than being amplified by a coaching staff sophisticated enough to fully weaponize it. Now let's get get specific. Because generalized accusations are easy to dismiss, specific, granular tactical analysis is impossible to ignore. And what is happening on the floor of Gainbridge Fieldhouse in the half-court sets designed by Stephanie White's coaching staff is, there is no other word for it, wasteful. Criminally, almost incomprehensibly wasteful. Caitlin Clark is not simply a good shooter. She is not merely a skilled passer. She is one of the most geometrically disruptive offensive forces in the history of the game at any level. The moment she touches the ball beyond the three-point line, and we are talking about the logo 30 feet from the basket, entire defensive systems enter a state of controlled panic. Two defenders abandon their assignments. Help rotations collapse inward. Paint lanes open up like highways at 3 in the morning. Corner shooters find themselves untouched. Aaliyah Boston finds herself staring at a wide-open mid-range look with zero resistance. The gravity that Clark creates is not a skill. It is a phenomenon. It is something that coaches scheme around for months and still cannot neutralize. It is the kind of offensive force multiplier that changes the fundamental mathematics of the basketball court. It is, in the most literal sense, a weapon that most coaches would spend their entire careers dreaming of possessing. And Stephanie White is leaving it in the holster, standing motionless in the corner. As a decoy, let that image settle for a moment. The player who single-handedly redefined what was possible in college basketball, running pick-and-rolls at full speed from half-court, threading bounce passes through triple teams, pulling up from distances that made NBA scouts drop their clipboards, is being deployed as a stationary prop in a half-court offensive system designed for players of considerably lesser ability. The Formula One analogy that's been circulating is painfully accurate. Imagine acquiring the most technologically advanced racing vehicle ever constructed, a machine engineered at enormous expense to operate at the absolute frontier of human performance, and then programming its GPS to obey residential speed limits. The machine still functions, it still moves, but everything that made it extraordinary is being systematically suffocated by the constraints imposed upon it. And the players know it, the teammates know it, the fans watching at home know it. The only people who appear not to know it, or more troublingly, the only people choosing not to acknowledge it, are the ones holding the dry erase markers on the sideline. Now, that claim will be disputed. It will be challenged. And in fairness, it should be contextualized. But the sentiment behind it reflects something that is genuinely measurable, a perceived gap between the obsessive, around-the-clock dedication that this specific moment demands and the laid-back, everything-is-a-process communication style being projected from the coaching staff. Championship-level coaching is not a 9-to-5 profession. It is a total, all-consuming commitment. And right now, the optics of that commitment are being brutally scrutinized. Here is where the conversation becomes genuinely urgent, because everything we've discussed so far, the tactical misuse, the press conference deflections, the philosophical misalignment, those are organizational problems. They are fixable in theory. Rosters can be adjusted. Systems can be overhauled. Coaching staffs can be restructured. But what happens to Caitlin Clark's mind in the meantime? What is the cumulative psychological cost of operating daily inside a culture that is fundamentally incompatible with her competitive identity? Because athletes of Clark's caliber are not immune to their environment. They are not robots. They absorb the emotional atmosphere of their organization. They are shaped, sometimes permanently, by the standards that surround them. Consider the specific psychological profile we are dealing with. This is a player who carried the weight of an entire program, an entire fan base, an entire national conversation on her shoulders for 4 years at Iowa. A player who thrived under pressure so immense that most professional athletes would have buckled beneath it. A player who responded to physical intimidation, to dirty plays, to flagrant fouls, to being targeted and battered game after game, not by shrinking, but by erupting, by scoring more, by competing harder, by refusing, in the most visceral and public way imaginable, to surrender even a single inch of competitive ground. That player now stands on the court of a professional franchise and watches defensive assignments get blown with zero consequences. She watches the coaching staff smile through blowout losses. She watches the organization produce language about shared experiences and human connection when what she needs, what her entire competitive identity demands, is a war room mentality, a zero-tolerance standard, a coaching staff that burns with the exact same urgency she does, shared experience, humans who love the game. These are beautiful sentiments. In a community recreational league, they are exactly the right words. On a franchise carrying the weight of a generational superstar's legacy, the national spotlight of women's basketball, and the expectations of millions of fans who have invested their emotional energy in this team's success, they are the wrong words entirely. They are the words of a coaching philosophy that has made its peace with not winning. And for Caitlin Clark, that peace is not an option. The warning signs are already visible on the court. The flash of frustration, the raised hands, the barely contained disbelief when the offensive system breaks down for the 5th consecutive possession in a row. These are not the reactions of a player player who has given up. These are the reactions of a player who is desperately, furiously fighting against a current that keeps pulling her backward. Every athlete knows that there is only so long you can fight a current that your own organization refuses to address. The Indiana Fever front office needs to look directly at what history has already told them, loudly, clearly, and without ambiguity. Because this situation, as unprecedented as it feels from the inside, is not without precedent. Generational talents have been mishandled before. Organizations have failed to build worthy environments around once-in-a-generation players before. And the consequences of that failure have always been the same. LeBron James did not win a championship with the Cleveland Cavaliers during his first tenure there. He left. He found a championship culture elsewhere. He built his legacy in spite of that original organizational failure, not because of it. Stephen Curry existed in professional basketball obscurity until the Golden State Warriors made the single most consequential coaching decision in modern NBA history, and an entirely new offensive philosophy was born. The talent was always there. The system was the problem. The Indiana Fever are standing at the exact same fork in the road. They have the talent. They have the global attention. They have the once-in-a-generation player that organizations build entire decades around. What they are currently providing her is a coaching environment that is philosophically, tactically, and psychologically inadequate for the scale of what she represents, the ceiling of the franchise. Those words should be read and reread by every single person in the Indiana Fever front office, because elite superstars in the modern era of professional sports do not sacrifice their primes. They do not loyally endure dysfunction out of organizational obligation. They identify the environments that give them the best chance to build their legacy, and they pursue those environments with the same ruthless efficiency they bring to everything else. The front office is currently engaged in a high-stakes political calculation, protecting their coaching staff, managing the narrative, hoping that the talent is sufficient to paper over the philosophical cracks. Meanwhile, fans are organizing. Tickets are dropping to prices that would have been unthinkable 12 months ago. Empty seats are appearing on national television broadcasts, sending an unmistakable message to every league executive, every sponsor, and every potential free agent watching from the outside. Opening night is coming. The lights will be bright. The cameras will be everywhere. And within the first 4 minutes of that first game, everything that has been debated, disputed, and dismissed will be laid completely bare for the entire world to evaluate in real time. Either the Indiana Fever will take the floor with a discernible, coherent plan to fully unleash what Caitlin Clark is capable of, or they will not. Either Stephanie White will have evolved her offensive philosophy to match the scale of the weapon she has been given, or she will not. Either the defensive accountability standards will have been fundamentally restructured from the ground up, or they will not. There is no middle ground left. No more preseason grace periods. No more benefit of the doubt. No more absorbing organizational spin about long-term development and shared experiences and the human element of the game. The competitive window for Caitlin Clark is not infinite. No athlete's is. Every game that passes under a coaching staff incapable of maximizing her potential is a game that cannot be recovered. Every loss absorbed inside a loser mentality culture is a brick in the wall being built between this franchise and its championship aspirations. Kobe, Jordan, Bird, every single name in the conversation about the greatest to ever compete at the highest level shares one defining characteristic. They were surrounded, eventually, by organizations that matched their hunger, coaching staffs that refused to accept moral victories, front offices that made difficult, uncomfortable, sometimes ruthless decisions in pursuit of a single goal. Caitlin Clark deserves that. The Indiana Fever fan base deserves that. And right now, at this specific moment in the history of this franchise, the only thing standing between this organization and its potential destiny is the willingness to look honestly at what is happening, acknowledge the depth of the problem, and make the kind of bold, decisive decision that championship organizations are defined by. The loser mentality has to go. The gaslighting has to stop. The tactical malpractice has to end. Because Caitlin Clark was not drafted to drag an incompetent system across the finish line. She was drafted to lead a championship caliber organization to the promised land. And until the Indiana Fever build an environment worthy of what she represents, every single day that passes is a day of her career that they are stealing from her. This is WNBA Pro. We don't protect incompetence. We don't swallow the spin. We tell you exactly what is happening, because Caitlin Clark deserves nothing less than the truth.